I'm Lawrence Francis, host of Interpreting Wine, welcoming you to the McLaren Vale Winemaker special series. Across these 3 episodes, recorded in February 2023, we'll be exploring the modern McLaren Vale scene in the company of 3 producers, reflecting the up-to-date realities of winemaking in the region, with guests chosen to reflect a range of locations, production scales, and philosophies. Without doubt, the most up-to-date exploration of McLaren Vale, available anywhere in podcast format. Make sure you subscribe to be alerted when new series episodes go live. We kick things off today in the company of Jock Bosworth of Battle of Bosworth Wines. We hear Jock's origin story before he takes us on a McLaren Vale culture deep dive and discusses the wider winemaking community. We get a regional visual tour and he talks geology before getting into grape growing, the range of wines and winemaking style, and he talks their various export markets. Enjoy.
My start in the wine and vineyard game, according to my partner Louise, is a lack of imagination. We're currently living on the farm I grew up on. My old man started the vineyards, so he had a Holden dealership, which was the Australian car that he and his brother ran in McLaren Vale. And he realised in the early 70s, after he bought a house which had a small vineyard on it, that he really didn't like people, and he could spend his time in a vineyard and not deal with people, and he enjoyed the farming aspect and all of that sort of thing, and expanded and moved to Wollonga with an old home here. And so I grew up basically planting grapes and pruning, doing all the standard operations, and then started the wine business much later after uni and working overseas and interstate and all that sort of thing, when I had the come home call.
And can you take us a little bit into what kind of were you doing overseas, and was that in any way related to wine, or was that something completely different?
Yeah, so we after school went to Wagga, which is a uni 1,000 kilometres away in New South Wales, whereas most of my friends went to Roseworthy in the other side of Adelaide, which isn't very far away. And I wasn't really all that sure as to whether I was going to Wollongong or Wagga. I could never remember, having met one of the lecturers socially, when I was doing my applications, and changed my application, went to Wagga, which was great. Studied that, and then viticulture, and then after that, I sort of worked vintages in California and Oregon, and did a little bit in France. Came home. That didn't last long, so I went and got a job running a small vineyard and winery outside of Melbourne. I did that for about 3 years or so, and then came back to McLaren Vale in the mid-90s and started running the family vineyards, changed them to organic pretty much straight away, and then started making wine in the shed, like a lot of people do, and then that kept growing, and I sort of had to go legit and actually get a liquor license and do it all properly. It was far more profitable when I was doing it under the table to local hotels and that sort of thing. But things change, and as you get older, you sort of realise you can't get away with that sort of thing forever. And so that's how the Battle of Bosworth wine label was born.
Yeah, very cool, very cool. And so this is the first conversation I'm having as part of this McLaren Vale series, and I haven't kind of yet had the pleasure really of visiting and getting a sort of a first hand immersion into the region there. So I think that would be a brilliant part of the story, maybe to kind of focus in on that kind of taking over the family estate. Take us into kind of what did that look like, what was going on more broadly around the region, and I guess what sort of support was there.
A little bit about McLaren Vale and that sort of thing. A little bit of a snapshot there. So McLaren Vale is like many wine regions, everyone thinks that they're in a pretty region, but ours is a very pretty region, a nice region. So we've got we're in the foothills of a small town called Wollonga, and the district is framed by the Mount Lofty Ranges. So you've got hills more so than mountains to the east of the district, and then that's framed by the sea, which is St. Vincent's Gulf to the east. And that moderates our temperature and makes it such a nice place. And we're sort of about 50 kilometres from Adelaide, so the sea is very important to most people here. And McLaren Vale as a region, when I came back here in the mid-90s, it was very much a grape and wine boom. So when I returned, see every spare horse paddock and almond orchard had just about turned into a vineyard. But the McLaren Vale community is a genuine community, and it's sort of I think very progressive and friendly. And I think quite a few people have commented that you don't have to live here for 50 years before you get considered a local. It's it's only 25. So, no, but it as far as Australian grape growing regions go, I think it's quite progressive. So we were sort of very early in the prescribing water rights in the area. So actually, the whole sustainability thing, which is a big buzzword domestically and probably internationally, it's sort of been something that's probably been quite considered here for a long time. I think a lot of there is generational farming, but there is a lot of new blood, and people sort of are aware of what happens locally. So active grower groups and conservation of natural resources being very important. We've been growing grapes, first certified organic in 1999, so and started the process in 95. So that was very early in that sort of thing. But now McLaren Vale probably has more certified organic and biodynamic and the sort of sustainable sort of vineyards than any other Australian wine region. And I think it's just, the sort of thing that everyone's very aware of and want to have something to pass down to our children.
And is that you maybe have answered a question that I had, was that is obviously really early in the piece to even be thinking about getting certified organic. So like what were those kind of key drivers, I guess, that drove you and your parents to think about that so early in the piece?
Well, I think it's probably a bit of the progressive nature of the district. So my father was, that bloody progressive word again, but in a different sense. So he was, trying to do the cutting edge of the day, best practice, all that sort of thing. So he was using the right synthetic chemical at the right time for the purpose of, herbicides and synthetic fungicides, and basically whatever the Department of Ag recommended. And when I got back in the mid-90s, I was actually, doing some of this sort of stuff, and this was the modern way of doing things. And I thought it was crazy because there's more for a health and environmental sort of. So some of these, products we're using are poisons, and that have it on the labels, that sort of thing. And I was very slack with my own safety, gloves and respirators and that sort of thing. And the guys I worked with were just as bad as me. And I thought, well, everyone was organic, 30 years previous. And so I thought, well, why wouldn't we just go back to that style of farming? And so with a bit of thought, worked out some, a bit more scientific, which we knew what we were trying to do, and we were knew what the concerns were. And so we dropped out a lot of the synthetic sprays, and then allowed some of the weeds to grow, the soursop in particular. And when we realised we were able to manage it, because one of the one of the big fears was crop loss. Those grapes are your income for the year.
Yeah.
And if you don't have those grapes, you don't have any income. So just making sure that the sky wasn't going to fall in and we were going to pick a crop, that was the big thing. So we did that on a trial on about a third of the property, and then gradually just converted everything over to organic. And we soon realised, we're using a lot of things unnecessarily. And, nothing with the water conservation side of things. A lot of people realised they were just using too much water that wasn't needed for quality. It needed to be much more precise. So all those sort of things have been for the better. It's really just innate. It's the way we do things now. And most of my neighbours follow similar sort of practices, and some other wineries are all on board. And so it's probably locally, it's probably considered the best practice now, as opposed to the chemical farming of 40 years ago.
Yeah, I love it. And it just randomly kind of, popped into my head as, I'm kind of, grown up in a, very suburban environment in London. And there's always that thing of, when somebody gets their, I don't know, roof done over the road, then, people start talking to them, and maybe, people put a sign up there. And I guess those things, a little bit of it is just, things become normalized, right? It's just like what you see your neighbor doing, and it opens curiosity, and opens kind of your mind to that. And I think I'm sure there's been some interesting, conversations just sort of held informally. And then, as you say, it's only when you kind of take a step back and look at the figures, and you realize that, wow, we're actually, we've gone in this kind of incremental way, but now we're, right at the cutting edge, and we're, as you say, one of the sort of, most highly certified organic and biodynamic regions in Australia.
And I suppose also the sustainability practices are the same, but I think a lot of that is the progressive nature of the region. So they have always been quite early adopters of new technologies or new techniques. People will have a go and try things here in McLaren Vale.
Very cool, very cool. And I guess as well, I'm curious about often when I hear the conversation, as you've already brought up, around quality of grape growing, that's often when brands have shifted from selling fruit to making wine, because they're obviously then, concerned right the way through the kind of production process. So is that right? Like when you came back, were your parents selling the grapes, and then you kind of brought the brand on? Tell us a little bit the timing around that.
Yeah. No, that's precisely right. So my folks were primarily selling grapes, and but my father always tried to grow the best grapes he could, and putting things in the best sites and that sort of thing. But when it's going into your own label, it's far more important. That quality side of things was sort of almost incidental with the change in practices too.
Very cool. So I think this is great to kind of as I say, understand the background of the region, and where you collectively have also sort of grown from, and the culture that your brand and your approach has come from as well. So what I'm keen to do though is kind of really bring us up to date, and I think the best way to start to explore that is really through the geography of your sites there, and kind of what we would see really if we were to go and walk around there. But I think that again, because this is the first episode from the series, I think first of all, as you've already sort of hinted, maybe give us, to start with, a kind of a drone's eye view really of you and your site, and place that in the kind of wider region, and then, as I say, kind of bring the drone down, and what's it like then site by site actually standing there.
Okay, so Battle of Bosworth Wines are situated in the south, on a southeastern boundary, effectively, of the McLaren Vale wine region. So we're in the foothills of the Mount Lopresti ranges that surround, or encapsulate the district. So where we are, you have the sea to the west. That's probably about 7 kilometres away. And we're at about 130 metres at Celador here at the moment. And then if you travel up the hill another probably 2 kilometres and get over the back of the hill, the climate changes. So where we are, we've got the sea moderating things. We have a Mediterranean maritime climate. But once you drop over the back of the range here, you're in the Adelaide Hills, and it's a continental climate. With the colder nights, we're frost-free where we are here in Wollonga, so we can grow avocados and all sorts of things. It wasn't until I was in the UK that I actually realised the significance of that sort of thing. My wife, Louise, is English, and on the Grand Tour in 2002, I think we turned left to see the world's second largest ball of string, and then seeing the only lemon tree that had consistently fruited in England, which it just didn't occur to me that you couldn't grow citrus, which is just sort of something we all take for granted here. So that's diverting a bit, but so that's McLaren Vale, and I'm sure other people you'll talk to will talk a lot more about the geology. We've had ice ages, and the sea has been over us about 3 or 4 times, and what we have is a spectacularly mixed up geology because of glacial movement and the various ice ages, and mountain ranges slipping and carrying on. If you have a look at a map of the region, the geologies, you'll see all that sort of thing. Where we are, currently, McLaren Vale has this fantastic map of the geology. It says fault exactly where we are. So we're sitting right on a fault line. We've got very old buildings here, so we've got a old for Australia, old for South Australia, 1840s house, and there's old stables up above Celador that is a collapsed ruin, but because we had an earthquake along the fault line here in the 50s, and we lost part of that fell down. It's been sitting there ever since. And then when we go through the vineyards, most of our geology it's called Christie's Beach Formation, but for McLaren Vale, it's a relatively young geology. But what we've got is a lot of we have a red-brown earth sort of topsoil with some very alluvial clay layers, and those alluvial clay layers give us some water holding capacity, which is great. And so here at Wollonga was actually Australia and the Southern Hemisphere's biggest almond growing district up until about the 1950s, and that was these soils which are called an herb stony loam, which basically had an unusual combination of having good water holding capacity, but also being well drained. Because almond trees in particular would get various root diseases and that sort of thing if they had wet feet for any length of time.
Yeah.
And that's the major geology, soil and geology we have here. So we're on a slope here, and it leads down to some flats. But so I say the Christie's Beach Formation is predominant geography. That's the actual rocks underlying. The actual soils are completely different. They're crazy because they're all this mixing over time. So I've dug soil pits on the block just in front of where we are now. I dug 3 soil pits, and I had effectively 3 different soil types, which makes the management a bit of a challenge. But if you don't know what you've got, you can't be challenged by it. So that's good, and that's not unusual here. People sort of see the differences in their soil and rows and farm them accordingly.
Yeah, totally. And I think this is, again, for me, always the fascinating part of the conversation is to then build on all of that. And then kind of, I know it's never a perfect science, but, then kind of start to map those different soils and those different aspects then to the grapes. So, getting into, okay, what are maybe, again, starting sort of slightly broader in terms of, what have you got planted there? Where are things performing best?
Yeah.
But then also, I'm sure, again, with this quality word as well, I'm sure then there are even then, micro lots and sub parcels then that maybe warrant special attention and maybe end up in their own bottling, further down the line. So that would be great to, give us that part of the story.
Yeah, so we grow quite a few different varieties here, which isn't unusual for McLaren Vale. So obviously we grow the McLaren Vale staples of Shiraz, Cabernet and Chardonnay. But we've also things like Touriga Nacional and Graciano, Sauvignon Blanc of all things. That's actually an old variety in McLaren Vale. So there's a particular McLaren Vale clone of Sauvignon Blanc that's sort of, so I think there's a few. I think one of the vineyards is sort of 120 years old. That's sort of still producing around the place. Semelon is another variety. The McLaren Vale's, it's not cursed and I don't like the word blessed, but it's a region where if you put the work in, you can pretty much grow anything well, which, other regions have I think Chelsea described us as some of the laziest viticulturalists and winemakers in the country because it's a little bit too easy. But no, people do work hard here. But what matching your variety for your soil type. So generally, your white varieties will probably be on your deeper soils. Something like Shiraz, or Grenache, you'll have on your shallower, hungrier sites. You'll be a bit much meaner with those. But then you've got varieties like Cabernet that you can't be too mean to because it doesn't. It's a bit of a sook, so that actually needs some softer country as well. And we all sort of know where those sites are and work through it. And then when you're on each individual block, when we're determining how we pick, you do your basic Beaumet test, work out your sugar levels and see how much acid you've got and that sort of thing. But that's just early on in the piece. What most people do these days, which was less encouraged in the 80s, there was sort of going almost completely on taste. So there are walking rows and, tasting the grapes to determine when to pick. So that's crucial for most varieties. And in that, you know your blocks. And so you know where your best sections generally are. And so what we do, and quite a lot of other people do, is split pick. So where I earlier mentioned a site in front of us where we had 3 different sort of soil types, we'll sort of it's a huge pain in the ass. You're much better to know these things before you plant. But we'll pick 3/4 of a row and leave a third, and then come back and pick that other third in a week or so's time, because we know that both picks will be better than if they were picked together. They'd both be lesser wines. So that's all part of it. That's it's important, painful, but it's important.
Yeah, painful, and again, I think that keep coming back to the word of quality. It's like, okay, would anybody want to do that if they were just selling the grapes? If it was pick and then kind of out the door and kind of never see them again. But again, these are then going through into wines.
There is a profit motive as well. So I think growers can very easily be encouraged to grow quality by being paid for it. And if it's worth their while to split pick, I know with some of the grapes we've sold to people, if it makes sense to do it, we'll do it.
Yeah. And so as we kind of start to think more about the bottled wine, then is that to say that all of the source of all of the grapes is your own production there? You're not buying any grapes?
Yes. So I really dislike the word estate, but I don't really have anything better. So we use only our own fruit, and we sell a few grapes as well, and might sell a bit of bulk wine as well. So you have to finance the operation. And
sure.
That'll play its role, and that's not uncommon over here. There's quite a lot of growers who have, historic growers who've moved over to winemaking in the past 20 or 30 years. As it's almost a natural progression for a lot of us. There's a big interest, and one thing follows another.
Love it. And I think again, hopefully this transition is nice and smooth for the listeners as well. Take us, I guess, final bit really on the growing sites. Talk to, I guess, the areas, that like how much land is actually kind of growing, and then let's start to transition into how do those different areas and different quantities of grapes show up in terms of the range of wines that are finally going to be bottled.
Our vineyard size is about 90 hectares, which is fairly significant in regards to sort of a small operation, running and maintaining. We've got all our blocks are very close to each other, and so that's all quite good. And we have we're probably, I should actually know these things off the top of my head, but I don't. So I think we're predominantly Shiraz, followed by Cabernet, and after that, there's a whole bunch of different varieties putting their hands up. We've got small plantings of a lot of different things. Petit Verdot I recently grafted because that was actually making fantastic wine. It was sort of regularly going into sort of one of my top wines. But there are sort of lifestyle and family considerations you have to make. So we've also got another vineyard on Kangaroo Island, which it's 3 hours away, door to door from the vineyard. And we make those wines here as well. And that is later than McLaren Vale. And the Petit Verdot was so late that I was often picking that after Kangaroo Island. And I thought, well, hang on, we've got to clean the winery up at some point. We need to go on holiday at some point. It's a shame. The wine's great, but it's got to go. So we don't have any more Petit Verdot. So the other varieties, Touriga Nacional and Graciano, Semillon, a whole bunch of others, but the varieties I won't be growing are the very late varieties, which the Alianicos and that sort of thing. I'll leave those to other people because, I'm just not interested in the stuff that's right at the end of the season.
Very cool. Okay, and then let's get again. It will be a fairly brief snapshot, really, because I think it's great. We've been talking mainly about the growing sites and the kind of the culture and the approach to that. So let's take a little first look inside the cellar, I guess, and understand a bit about how these wines and I guess some of the processes that they go through, and maybe the house style really of how they end up in the bottle.
Yeah, I think one of the big things with our site here is having bright, fresh wines is something that these foothills sort of sites do quite well. So with our reds, all the winemaking's very simple, open fermenters, we pump over, 2 or 3 times a day, depending on the stage of ferment, and then press. We get everything into the winery really quickly because obviously it's all on site, so it's all not very far away. The Chardonnay again, is just very simply pressed and into barrels, wild ferment. We try not to overcomplicate things if we can, and try and let the fruit speak for itself. One of the wines that we do that's probably a bit more unusual, adventurous, is the Puritan. Mm-hmm. So that's a preservative-free wine, but really it started off as a Hoven style. We want a bright, young Shiraz with no oak influence. And then we'd had people saying, well, you do something without sulphur. Then we realised for that style, and using screw cap, we could get away with it. And so we've been doing that since 2010. So this will be our 13th vintage of that wine, and that's a really good wine to sort of show people what Shiraz, an unadorned McLaren Vale Shiraz tastes like. That's just fruit, so there's no oak or overt tannin influence or anything like that. So that's one of the favourites here. But then, we, like a lot of other people, we probably do far too many wines. So we'll have a standard Battle of Bosworth Shiraz, and we'll have the Puritan, and then I might do some single vineyard wines and all that sort of thing. So can tend to get a bit carried away with how we do it, but we sort of like it. And some of the vineyards. So we'll do depending on the vintage, there's normally 2 or 3 blocks where I like to do a single vineyard Shiraz, because the characters are different. So Chanticleer, which is generally a very red-fruited wine, and there's Braden's block, which is normally a bit more blue or black-fruited. And then, another block, Dengs, which is different again to those two. So all that sort of thing. Well, I find it interesting, so hopefully other people do. But
absolutely, and as ever, the time has really kind of flown by. So really, last question, Jock, and I'd really like to kind of broaden out the conversation a bit, really, and just get a snapshot of where these wines are kind of ending up, in terms of, be that in domestically in Australia, and also kind of out there. What might be some of the wines or the ranges that are maybe having the most success for you internationally?
Yeah. So we're doing Battle of Bosworth out of McLaren Vale, and spring seed wines, all estate grown wines, and the Kangaroo Island Springs Road wines as well. But we've sent stuff everywhere over the years, but we're probably fair bit goes domestically, but we're selling stuff to UK, US, the Scandinavian countries. We had a Japanese importer here last week, going into Korea, which is a great fun place to visit. I don't think we've got anything in Belgrade yet. So maybe that might be
small market.
New frontier.
Very cool, very cool. And then just the last bit to sort of, I guess, tackle, maybe using the UK as an example. Are there particular ranges or price points or grape styles? The ones that seem to be doing the best for you over in the UK.
Yeah, I don't know. We've sort of been selling wine in the UK for a long time now. It seems I can't get a handle on it. The Puritan has always gone quite well, and the mid-price wines sort of go right, and occasionally the more expensive wines do. It all depends, I think, on who they're presented to and what sort of fits. But it's always very nice to be able to tell your friends in London that if they go to X Flash restaurant, they'll be able to see some of the booze there. So that's always nice to know.
And maybe a sign that the importer is doing a good job as well.
Oh no, you always complain about your importer, but yeah, no, that's sort of, it is good to see it out and about.
A huge thanks to today's guest, Jock Bosworth of Battle of Bosworth Wines. Make sure you visit battleofbosworth.com.au, where you can learn more about the project and find their main social media handles. Please help to amplify this episode and the McLaren Vale Winemaker series by sharing the direct link, which is interpretingwine.com/509. You can find links to all 3 episodes from the series in the description below. And of course, I'd love to have you following along with me on social media, where I'm at Interpreting Wine on Instagram and Facebook, and at Wine Podcast on Twitter. Next time on the Interpreting Wine McLaren Vale Winemaker series in episode 510, I'll be speaking with Luke Mallaby of Mitolo Wines. Make sure you're subscribed to be alerted when the episode goes live. See you then.